Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Ones Ready podcast. We got a good one for you today, as always. I mean, I don't, if I say it's a good one, does that mean other ones are bad ones? I'm always confused about how that works. Anyway, we got, you're right. Like, do we only get better? I don't know. But we got Jody Fletcher and Coach Morgan in here with us today. We're going to talk about the L word. And so let's just jump right into it. A little bit of background. If y'all don't mind introducing yourselves and kind of telling us about your podcast and what you guys talk about.
No, Jody, you tell the story the best.
All right. Well, I'm Jody Fletcher. I'm a retired Navy dude. Morgan is a retired Marine. And the genesis of our podcast called That L Word was really that we always sit around talking about leadership and love and life and all these things. And I actually had a meeting with one of the guys that produce our podcast, Signal Fire Media. And I just told them I don't ever want to have my own podcast. I enjoy being on other podcasts, and I was looking at content creation for other stuff, right? Morgan and I had a lunch scheduled, so I drove up to Jacksonville. We were eating burritos and started one of our conversations. And like an hour into the conversation, we were like, we're starting a podcast. So I called those dudes back and I was like, hey, I was just kidding. Morgan and I are going to start a podcast, and I don't think we had the name yet. No, but it popped up very quickly, that L word. And it just, I think I was telling you, Trent, before we jumped on, we don't even know what we're going to talk about. We often decide in the car. And I think we're going to put a GoPro in the car because the conversations in the car are on the way, are pretty awesome too. And then we get to the studio and sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't. And we often start with one or two words. We just did an episode on toxic positivity.
Toxic positivity.
And neither of us had ever heard that word. And so we just Googled it and then started talking about it after reading. And so it's very free form. It's very like, you never know what you're going to get. We often go down rabbit holes and find the Mad Hatter and try to get Alice, out of Wonderland.
I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like the rabbit holes. Because it's good to go like halfway down it, but then to come back because it does provide some value, but we never know where it's going. And we could have an idea because, like you said, usually we driving now. It's like, hey, what you want to talk about today? And we got 4 episodes to record in one day, and so we haven't discussed it or talked about it. So it makes it really genuine. And when we have guests, we might have had a small conversation with them, but they're walking into the unknown as well, and we just make it happen.
Yeah, we just had a guest on that. I do a lot of just cups of coffee, and that's how we were talking about how I ended up on this podcast. I've got a friend, Worth Parker, who is, I say instead of 7 degrees from Kevin Bacon, it's 7 degrees from Worth Parker, because he is like the master connector. So one day he and I were having a cup of coffee, and he's like, oh, dude, you got to meet this guy, Nate. And I was like, okay. So he introduced me to Nate, and then I was on Nate's podcast, and then Nate's like, dude, you got to meet these guys. And that's how I ended up on your podcast. But as I'm having these cups of coffee, oftentimes we invite people on the show, and we had a lady, her episode's already out, but she's an astrologist. She's a retired executive and is now an astrologer and uses that like I use assessments and coaching. She was fantastic, blew Morgan's mind. And I told him, I was like, bro, I sat down to have a cup of coffee with her. We talked for like 2.5 hours. It went by like 10 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, I got to go. And we had her on the show, and she ended up going out to lunch with us afterward. And then we just had another guy who it went so well, and he had time, luckily, that he ended up staying for 2 episodes. His isn't out yet. It's still in post, but his name is Fidel Ford. And I think we end up, having we all do, right? On these shows, you end up having these really unique guests that and I told Fidel, I was like, bro, I'm almost afraid to put you and Morgan together because it's going to be like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters. And it was. Those two in a room. At one point, Fidel was like standing up dancing, and it got crazy, man.
Well, I want to know, because this is something I ask myself a lot of times. You guys, A, I want to know about your different personalities, but B, also I want to know, at what point after you retired or during your career did you realize that you had something valuable to share with other people, or something that other people needed? Or is it more about just going down that journey and seeing where the path leads y'all?
Holy sheesh. Yeah, that's how we gonna do this? Lord have mercy.
Yeah, hey,
That's
just a real light one. Just a real light one, Morgan. Like, let talk about some rabbit holes. Like Trent, like just really lightly puts out a grenade that's like, it's like a Marvel movie, and there's like a black hole grenade. Like Trent's like, oh hey, here's a light topic to explore. Tell us about your entire life.
He just slowly rolled it into the room.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, you want me to tell you how you
go first, Morgan, because I talked about mine on the last show, and I'll talk about it again, but you go first.
I love it.
Effing, man. Holy crap. I wasn't ready for this. It's early.
I barely woke up for it. You know what? Like, I don't even know. Listen, I hopped in. Like, my eyeballs popped open at 6:59. I was like, oh God, my alarm didn't go off. Let me get my stuff together. And Trent's hitting us with a world-ending question.
One of our guests one time did say, hey, I like your question, but I'm going to answer a different question that I wish you would have asked. So you're always free to just bypass three questions.
No, I'm not gonna do you like that.
Talk about
that was like a 3-star general. He looked right at Trent and he was like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to answer the question I wish you would have asked. And then he just pivoted into what he wanted to talk about. Hilarious. And
public affairs.
Always an option.
Yeah, like this 3-star general was just like, nah, dog. Here's what I want to talk about.
His publicist already had prepped him. He said, "This is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to go down." For me, it was damn, I don't want to talk about this. But anyway, it just makes it goes sort of deeper into my emotional state, and which is always a task in itself. But 2012, I came back from Afghanistan. I had problems adjusting when I came back, and so I felt like really alone, or really like alienated from society based off people's wants and needs, and lack of appreciation, things of that nature. And it was people that were there for me and showed me that I wasn't alone. So after that transition, I think that's really started my journey of like enlightenment. And I started to really work on me and work on self, and my even in my relationship with my wife, she started to point some things out to me that I just wanted to do better and wanted to work on. And from there, I just really got after like making sure people had the tools to not feel empty or left wanting. And a lot of times in the world, we are told to be independent or you can do it alone. But like that, I think we were meant to be alone. The society wouldn't exist. We are here to help each other and bring value to each one of our lives. And so I decided to do that based off that experience. And then probably a couple of years into that, I had a hard time like going to work. Anxiety was real bad, and I was trying to take on too much. I was trying to change the world. And so I had a friend come tell me, he said, don't worry about everybody else. Worry about the people that are to the left and right of you. Worry about the people that are under your charge and just focus on them. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing because you can't affect everyone else. He said, basically each one teach one, right? The one inspires the many. And that's what I've really focused on. And I've been doing that ever since.
Wow. So I think, just hearing you talk through your experience, we've all felt like that. And it's a weird thing. People think that service members that have deployed, we're the most resilient and whatever. Dude, I have felt completely out of place. I remember distinctly after, deployment number 3 or 4 or something, I was in a grocery store and I had this moment where I was just frozen. I just stood and I was like, I don't know what this is. Like, I did not feel like I was even in the world that I was supposed to be in. Like, I felt like I did not fit. Like, everybody else was going about their daily lives, and I had just gotten back from Afghanistan like the 2nd or 3rd time, and I was like, what is going on?
The fog,
yeah. And it's the realization too. It's like, there's a concept of transfer of power, right? Like, and it's a relationship idea where, a woman becomes your weakness and you become her strength. And that's that transfer of power. It's the change of roles essentially. But I've felt like I've gone through a transformation like that, where you're supposed to be the strong one and you actually gain strength by saying, hey, no, man, I'm actually the weak one. I want to start helping other people get through this feeling of being lost and this feeling of not belonging, because we've had the experiences that we have. So the fact that you guys are able to, in a really transparent and a really vulnerable way, say, this is, that L word, this is leadership. This is how you live that truth, as squishy as that sounds. Like, that's really important. And the fact that you guys do it just on the fly, and you just chase rabbit holes and just talk about stuff, that's an amazing thing. Jody, for you got to the highest of the high, man. You're a god dang command master chief. You know what I mean? And I think we touched on imposter syndrome a little bit and not fitting in. How do you communicate to other people how to deal in that space? Like, cause it's a weird dichotomy. Like, you're the man, you're a god dang command master chief. And at the same time, you feel like you don't belong. You feel out of place. You don't feel like you're supposed to be there. How do you communicate that?
Yeah, Aaron, I've said it 1,000 times. If I've said it once, I used to sit in my office once in a while. It would just hit me, kind of like Morgan, you have that moment, or like you were talking about in the grocery store. I would just look up at the walls of my office here, waiting for somebody to come in, and I think, how in the hell did I get here?
Right.
I didn't set out thinking, oh, I want to be a command master chief.
Right.
I set out wanting to do what I did. And then the way I fell into all of that is, I came back from a deployment in 2012, and I was a 9 that jumped back in a team. And when I came back, I became the command master chief at MARSOC. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'll do this for, 2-3 years, whatever, and then get out. And I was going to go to PA school, which is a natural progression for a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
That would have put me at like 24 years or something, 23, whatever. And that was my full intent, was that. And I've always been a people person. I love people. I love people's stories. I love what makes people tick. I'm one of those guys that I've been told a lot, like, I've never said that to anybody before. People will say things to me.
You just have that face where people want to share with you.
Yeah. It's that and milk cartons. I've got that face for both. But they, as I was doing that job, I found myself thinking, wow, I did not anticipate loving this job as much as I do. Because when you're in that job, they're pushing you, oh, you got to take this command next, or go, get in the program to be an official command master chief. And of course, the first year I was like, no way, dude. I'm like going to PA school, whatever. And then it just kind of hit me. I'm like, I love this. And, I think I said it on your show before. I left MARSOC because then that was it for me as far as being a command master chief. And I went on to the conventional side, and I lost a ton of money when I did it because I lost all my special pays.
Yep.
But I
which is a travesty, by the way. What a dumb thing. Like, they want us to be like, we kind of talked about with Trent, like, but they want us to be these additional, leadership positions and being a transcendent person. And the first thing that they do is they take away your special pays. They take away your AFSC. They take away who you are as a, MOS or whatever else. For us, for wing, I think they've changed it, but they even don't let us wear our hat. They're like, you can't wear your beret. You don't want to look too special to people. Like, I think Cologne Lopez are, right. It's a weird thing. They're like,
you don't want to look too special, but you made me special, and you told me to be special and better than everybody else. But I can't have that no more.
Thank you. Preach, Coach Morgan.
What?
Thank you. But it's such a weird thing. Like, they want you to be this leader. And then the second that you get in a leadership position, they're like, well, you don't want to alienate the other airmen, so make sure you're not wearing your beret. Thankfully, we have an E9 that's the senior enlisted advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's the first one to ever do it. Cologne Lopez. He's a Chief Lopez, but he's worn his beret the entire time. He basically told you, he was like, F you, I'm a PJ. Like, this is part of who I am. So sorry for the derail there, but it's such a weird thing that when you get to those levels, they take away your special pays. They tell you, don't be who you are. That's literally what got you to that position. Like, you being who you are, Jody, got you there. And they ask you, in order to be a leader, give up more of who you are. And I think that's the barrier that a lot of us have. Like, Trent going to this senior NCO course, like, okay, great. It's good information, I suppose, but you're asking me to give up who I am to be what you think a leader needs to be. And it's frustrating. And people look for outlets. And I think that's why we're all here. So now we have more to give from our unique perspectives, and we want to be able to communicate that in a positive way. And it's frustrating to not have that outlet in the very strict confines of the military.
I think go ahead, Morgan.
I mean, this is really fast. Not to go down another rabbit hole, but
here we go. Let's go, baby.
It's crazy, right? Like how they build you up, right? They say this is what it looks like, and then they don't just try to point you in a different direction or pivot you. They try to redevelop you. The system is backwards, right, or messed up, however you want to look at it. Because there's nothing wrong with evolution. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, we call it re-bluing. Like when you go back to these schools, you get re-blued is like our common term. It's literally when you go to these schools, like the Air Force tries to make you into something different and like bring you back to it, like not just make you a better airman, a better leader. Like we even have a term for it in our community.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
That's how you know it's bad. That's how you know it's bad when they start making terms for bad things, right? It's like, it's not about like there's nothing wrong with growth, evolution, and continue to change. It's when they say everything you've done before doesn't matter. That's basically what they're saying, right? Now we got to give you something different because this is better. And instead of doing like they do in martial arts or anything else, they build on the foundation that you already have that exists, and that's the way you can understand. And then they wonder why people have identity crises. They wonder why people deal with depression or feel alienated or feel alone. Is because you're telling them what they've been for 20-some years is no longer valuable to them when you said put all your value in it. Right? We don't even have that much. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that when you look at that from a leadership perspective, especially great leaders, right? Great leaders are good humans first, and they recognize good humans and other humans. And whenever I transitioned and went in the conventional side, the first general that I worked for on that side was General Love. And one of the best leaders I've ever worked for. He was amazing. And he valued what I brought to the table. And what I brought was a different perspective, because I went in like palms up saying, hey, listen, I don't know anything about what y'all do, like in the grand scale. Most people have worked their way up through that community, and then they're, the command master chief, it was 2nd Marine Division at the time. And so I even had to go back to my books, like, oh my gosh, like where do AAVs fit in and all that kind of stuff, because it just wasn't on the forefront of my mind. I'd been in reconnaissance and MARSOC my whole career, literally.
Right.
And I remember sitting in the big conference rooms and up there with the general and the sergeant major, and then it was all the colonels or whatever. And I don't remember which meeting it was, but I remember thinking, yeah, that's a really weird way to think about that. And so, General Love, of course, looked at Sergeant Major and I at the end of everything. It's like, you guys got anything? And I said, yeah, and I spoke up and said whatever it was I said. I don't remember what I said, but it was
whatever
counter.
Out,
It was 180 out from what they were talking about. And later, General Love pulled me aside and he said, I really value the angle that you come from, because you're foreign from this, like you've not grown up in this community, basically. And he said it much more eloquently, of course, but he's like, what the value you bring is a different perspective that all of us, we kind of get in groupthink sometimes. And to have somebody with your background and your perspective come in, and that made me feel so good and so valued. Right. And it doesn't mean that I said something at every meeting or whatever, because I do remember there were a couple of times where he's like, Jody, you didn't say anything. I'm like, well, I didn't really have anything to say, sir. Like, I'm not going to talk just to talk, but right, when he gave me that permission to then like really come out and be like, hey, I'm 180 out from what you're thinking, or how about this? That's that, we talk a lot about psychological safety nowadays, and that's the squishy term for it, but that's what he did. Yeah. He provided that permission to say, hey, not only do I want you to speak up, but I value what you're saying. And
wow. What
that
a good leader.
Beats down. Oh, he's amazing. He's amazing. And I had,
he's a good dude.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's where Morgan and I met, was that same, because Morgan was just a couple offices down, but it's that kind of thing that beats down imposter syndrome, back to your point earlier, Aaron, because when you are sitting in these offices and you're like, how the hell did I get here? Like, I just wanted to jump out of planes and hang out with cool people and shoot guns, right? And next thing you know, you're like sitting at the head of the table where there's, 20,000, 30, 40,000 people in that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And you do think to yourself, what am I doing here?
Man, I had, there was a weird, distinct feeling the very first time that it happened. I went from, showing up to the meeting and having my pen and my paper and whatever. The very first time that I set the meeting and it was my meeting, I was like, what am I doing? You're looking around for the adult in the room and they're like, hey, Aaron, you're the adult now. And I'm like, no, I need an adultier adult. Like this isn't, what am I doing? You feel almost disconnected. It's like an out of body experience. The quote, I say it all the time at work. You either die a hero or you live long enough to be a villain. And I am a them now and not an us. Like I'm not on the teams.
Ooh,
so what are you doing, Aaron? What are you doing to bridge that gap?
Oh yeah, man. I'm about to get that one.
Ooh, man, so first of all, it's admitting it. It's being transparent and looking at everybody and being like, listen, this is the game. Okay. I am not like, and it seems weird, but the thing that I do to bridge that gap is I admit that the gap exists. And then I live in that space. I'm like, I'm not on the teams. I am here to, great example. Like, we went through a long back and forth as you always do on the budget recently, right? Like, the new fiscal year, the new training plan is coming. We hit a budget cut, right? So the teams don't get to go out and buy all of the Arc'teryx and go on stupid horseback riding trips and like all of these other things that are kind of like, we'll talk about that later. That's a real thing, by the way, $120,000 for a soft horseback mountaineering trip that I literally like turned around and I was like, are you effing joking? Was this meant to be a joke to one of, anyway? So, but that's where I am. Like I owe them the questions. I have to be able to separate myself. Like I'm not your bro. I am your A3. I am your ops soup. I'm looking at you and I'm asking you, how does this get after warfighting? I want you to explain this. You did not do your homework on this one. You did not it seems weird because that is the separation, but I am at the same time trying to lead them through it. Like when they come to me with a problem, I'm not just like yes or no. I'm like, hey, we need to talk about what's your problem statement. How did you think through this? Did you mission plan correctly? Did you consider all of these other factors? I had to lean in to the separation because I'm not your team leader. I am a step above your team leader at this point. And we need to be able to have a conversation on how are you developing your operators to be, my position. I've said that all the time. I recently moved over to the wing, out of my squadron. And I looked at everybody. It was a pretty quick move. I looked at everybody and I was like, listen, guys, I've been training you for this moment right now. My whole job has been to teach you to fish, not give you a fish. And if I've done my job, I'm going to get out of this office. I'm going to go over to this other office and you guys should just drive right on. You guys should just be able to be like, okay, he's been training me for this the entire time that he's been here. I just didn't realize it. I think that. Go ahead.
No, you built that trust for those conversations through that vulnerability and transparency, right? So isn't that's the first step?
I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done it. I'm juggling flaming chainsaws every single day. I have no idea what it's like being a parent. It's the same thing with my kids. I've got a 17-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. They're both driving now and they're disassociated from where I am. They're in Albuquerque. I'll straight up, I've told my daughter for years, she'll be like, I'm having this problem. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm doing. Like you think your parents are these superheroes and we do the same thing to like commanders and, chiefs and command master chiefs and all these other people. You assume that they're these infallible people that like know something that you don't. No, they're just humans and they're figuring it out day by day by day, trying to like, it's event to event almost of like, how do I fix this? And there's failure and all those things involved. It's a moving target every single day. But I think the more that you're transparent and vulnerable and you just open yourself up, you're like, listen, this is the game. I have to think about other things, but I love y'all. I got love in my heart for every single operator, every single support person, every single person that works for me, with me, under me. Like, y'all, I get it. I have to think about these things. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not perfect, but I have to do this thing. I found that to be valuable. I don't know. It would be interesting to talk to somebody like completely disassociated with us. It'd be interesting to get like an E5 and be like, how do you think Aaron did? Do you think that set you up best? I think that would be an interesting thing to get the feedback from.
Well, I think the feedback comes from those people, right? There's several things that bubbled up for me when you were talking there, Aaron. A is the flip side of what you're talking about is the responsibility you have to the folks that are still in the team, you have to the people that are above you. And I found myself a lot of times helping to, I don't want to say educate but for lack of a better term, that's what I'll use, but helping them see a different perspective because they assume, oh, they're a bunch of damn cowboys, or, oh, they want this or they want that, or some, horseback riding trip, to help them maybe see the light that, and maybe that's not the great example, but what if that thing was critical to the mission you were trying to do? Right. To help them understand, hey, no, that actually is important. Then you being the bridge in there and being vulnerable and saying to both parties, listen, I'm kind of in no man's land because I don't know all the stuff that you all know up here, but I also am now removed from the teams and I'm not up to date on all the latest whatever's going on. So you're more of an intermediary there, regardless. I think at that E7, 8, and 9 levels, that's really what your job is to be able to translate what the folks on the ground need to the folks in the sky and what the folks in the sky are trying to do for the folks on the ground. And if you're good at it, you're able to help both sides, for the most part, understand what the other needs and come together. Kind of like, the mediators and wedding planners. Or wedding crashers.
Wedding crash. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it does feel.
You're talking to me.
You shut your mouth. You shut up. It is a weird thing. That is how you feel, And I don't. I've made this joke before. I don't know what happens. I think there's a school that people go to at when you're in E9 and when you're in O4, where you get a lobotomy and you bad leaders completely forget what it's like to be in the team room, and they just start talking about all this stuff. You're like, what happened to you? Do you not remember what it's like being in these team rooms and whatever?
But how many of them were good? And using CZ as an example, and I had the privilege of meeting him once or twice when he was at AFRICOM. And
talent, right?
Oh my God. But see, he's the kind of leader. Now look at how you're talking about him and look at his tremendous reputation. It's because he never forgot where he came from, but he also wasn't using that as this is why you should listen to me. He is who he is. That's the key to all of it, is who you are as a person transcends all of this other stuff, what you've done, what rank you are, all of that. That's where I think the true magic is. And if we think about the amazing leaders that we've seen, they were good humans before they were way up the food chain, when they were still in the team or in the battalion or whatever it was. And the ones that, have kind of lost their way, if you really reflect, a lot of them were not that cool in the teams either.
Yeah. Facts. Facts, man. I
mean, I don't know. Morgan, what do you like? Morgan came up on the other side of the house. What was your experience like as you started to climb the ladder?
Everybody expects you to know what the hell you're talking about when you don't know. I remember it. I know what Aaron talking about. I told you that. He was talking about when I picked up E8. I was like, they did fucked up. What are you doing? Do you know? And I think I was
do
telling
you
myself
know what you just did? Yeah.
You gave me what? And I always tell people they don't want to give me that kind of power. They don't want to. It was crazy that I did some amazing things with it, bro. Because it just was my I always tell people I learned how to be a Jedi master, right? And then you get to a point where you are able to sway people's conversations and actions just by with your words and your actions. So that example that you said, but as I was growing up, man, it was I always wanted people to not follow me. I never thought like that. Do what I say. Do what I say. And I'm hold on. Let me see. Let me digress. Never. E4 E4 and below. I was I remember the first day I picked up corporal, I literally got counseled because I went ape shit like on everybody.
I've never seen so little power go to someone's head so quickly as when you picked
The
up
same
Corporal.
same day, bro. It was
Going
I was
hard in the
like,
paint. I love it.
yes, on friends too. They were like, "What the hell?" I sent everybody down the building and had a one-on-one with them, like I was like the big dog, you know.
Oh my
And
God, I love it.
but
God, I love it.
over time, I got to the place like I want. I do care about what people think, and people say, "Oh, I don't give a fuck about nobody thinks." Da, da, da. That's a lie. We all
That's
do, right? In some way, shape, or form,
100%. 100%.
right? And so I wanted to have. When I thought about my Marines, I wanted them to care about me the way I cared about them. And I understood that it was my responsibility to make it safe for them and to teach them how to do that, professionally. And I didn't want to have to call on them and say, this is what you will do. This is how it will happen. I wanted to be able to say, I need you. And they were there with no question. Right. Because I think that's where we get caught up about what's on our collar, but we forget about what's in our heart, right? That we're human
Wow.
beings, that we
Yeah.
have a connection, right? And that's the
Yeah.
part where I wanted to continue to emphasize that in everything we do. And I ain't been retired that long, but my Marines still texting me, still calling me, asking me questions, and that makes me feel like I've done it right, right? Because
Nice.
like Jody said, it is like, the Marine Corps kind of gave me the tools to be better, right? But they also gave me the chances to fail, to learn the lessons that I needed to learn, to be better for
Mhm.
those that respect me enough to follow me.
Mhm.
And I think as we go up, we forget that, and we start getting into a place of superiority, right? Where they say, "Oh, I'm here, so you have to listen." I said, but there's a difference between having to listen and wanting to be there. The level of engagement that you get from somebody that loves you, right, respects you, and cares about your well-being, are the people that jump on grenades for people, right?
Hell yeah. Yeah.
The other side of that is a motherfucker that'll turn his back and is like, fuck, run the other way,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And so if go ahead.
no, I'm just thinking this. Sorry, there's two type of confident leaders, right? There's the ones that are arrogant confidence because they're thinking all about their own ability. But you look at like the leaders that you love, their confidence comes from they're confident that their team can do anything that they're asked to do because they've built those relationships, because they put all their love and effort into their team. It's not about the person at the top. It's about what their team can do. And they come across as a very confident and competent leader. But it's never about them, right? It's all about, developing their people so that their team can accomplish their tasks. So I think that's
and
a
it's
huge
the difference.
difference.
Yeah. The
Yeah, and to
difference
that-
between transactional leadership and transformative leadership, like that,
Mm.
that's
Love
like
it. Yeah.
transactional leadership is like, you're going to do what I told you to because I'm in a position of power. Transformation really happens when like, hey, this is the right thing to do. And I want to see the team do it absent my authority. Like my authority doesn't matter here. I want you to transform. And it's a dumb thing from senior NCOA, like the transactional leadership model and the transformational leadership model. Like transformation is the highest. And I talked about it earlier with teaching somebody to fish, and you talked about it just now, Morgan, with, people still texting you and growing in their own right and using you as a sounding board, even though you're not in anymore. Man, that's the goal. That is the effing goal. I want you to be better. I had a very smart friend of mine that said leadership is tricking people into being better than they could ever be without them knowing it. And I've always thought about that. I've been like, holy crap, like, I want you to be better. Like every day I want to teach you without actually you knowing that I'm teaching you. I want my words to echo in your head at a time where you need them, completely absent of what I've done now. I want to be that type of leader. I want to help you be the best person, and hopefully you're better than me. Hopefully you're way. I want my operators under my charge to be better than I ever have been. I want them to lead better than I have been. That's why I love talking about my failures. Holy crap. Let me show you all these pitfalls that I hit in my career. Let me tell you all the times that I failed. Don't do that. Be better.
Yeah, and I would add to that the immersive leader. And this just kind of came to me because when I was teaching at Field Med, it's all the corpsmen that are going to go greenside with the Marines, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things I used to say, and I didn't come up with this, my old man or somebody told me, right? If you look at a group of Marines, you shouldn't be able to tell who the sailor is or who the sailor isn't. because you've immersed yourself and you've blended in, and you're just one of the crew that happens to have the medical skills. I think solid leaders are as immersive. If you look at a group of people, you should not be able to point to one and say that one's the one who's, and I'm using my air quotes, in charge. Because an immersive leader has surrounded themselves with people that are smarter than they are, and they've built that area of trust so that the team can just keep going.
I love it.
No matter what, right?
Yeah.
To Jody's point, like, spot on, Jody. I'll give you your props. You're a good guy. And then
I like it. We provided you the space to be right, Jody, and you crushed it. Good job.
Thank you.
But that was it reminds me of like the first time I was around a group of leaders. Like, usually I'm in charge of something, or I'm the head, through your life, and you learn, like, you get sucked in and you get into this complex, and it's almost like going through the season, Jody, where I was an E8 and I was the only E8 out of the people going to pick up E7, right? And I'm like, damn, I'm the only one here that gets it, kind of, right?
Yeah.
But the first time I was around leaders, the amount of stress just came off, because like I was like, I don't got to do it. I don't have to be the one. Like, I don't have to depend on just me. I don't have to like make sure, like, they were so, it was so freeing to be in a group of people that you respect, that were just as capable as you are, because you empowered them to be so, right? That you can sit back and you can just let things happen, and you don't have to make them happen. You don't have to, tell people what to do. Like, when you develop a team like that, it's powerful, man. And what it does, it builds a level of confidence within the ability to accomplish whatever mission or task he is moving forward, because they don't have to depend on it. Because the key is, leaders that are not effective are trying to make themselves useful. They want to say, you need me, I have to be here, I got to be a part of this. But the true leaders, right, they understand, it's like, I want to teach you not to need me. I want you to be able to be an active thinker, be proactive, be able to troubleshoot and be self-aware, to have self-control, so you can be involved in anything at any level. That's the key to like leadership success. Like, anything that we teach, everything that we talk about right now, anything that we're teaching them in the service, or in a corporation, or in a business, or in a family, if true leadership is your goal, then everything that you're teaching them will transcend whatever environment that you're in. It will make you a better person, and better people make better decisions, and better decisions make better lives, and better lives change the world. So,
man, I knew I liked you. I knew it. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. And I'll bring up CZ. So CZ put out, his silver bullets, his carnivore leadership. But one of those things is like, you can't fly with the eagles if you hang out with turkeys. The second that you surround yourself with those true leaders, you know what I mean? Like, iron sharpens iron. Like, the axioms are true, and it's almost a cliche. But when you surround yourself, like me being on this podcast, I'm not the smartest person on this podcast. I'm not the most developed person on this talk that we're having right now. But that's important. That's what leadership is providing everybody the space to be like, oh wow, look at all these superstars. People get lost on it, especially in the soft community. And I've distinctly this last week, I forgot what it was like working in the regular Air Force for a little bit. And I looked around and was like, holy cow, my entire career, I've been surrounded by the top 1% the entire time. Like, holy cow. And it's not to say that, it's just different. But you know what? Like, I don't look at it from an elite. I don't think I'm an elitist. When I walk around the halls of the regular office that I work in now, I'm not like, ugh, these people are, I have a different colored hat and the things on my uniform look remarkably different than theirs. Ugh. No, I'm like, no, I owe them more. I owe them way more than they owe me, because I have these experiences and I can help. I can provide, like Jody, earlier you were talking about, you can provide that different optic. Man, I value that. I want to bring them up to my level, whatever that level is. And it might just be kind of in a different lane, but I want them to have that experience. Like, I have a genuine need. It helps me as a professional feel like I'm of service and being served correctly to give them, those tools that we have. And I love how, Morgan, you talk about like as a family, like as a person, you should be doing that inside of your own little tribe as well. Just to be, I love Nate and, inheriting manhood and talking about how to just be a better man. I think there's a lot of reflections in there of leadership and personal development from these optics. But Morgan, man, dead on. Like, people should be able, absent your influence entirely, they should be able to lean into the culture that you've established. That's really important.
But I think that goes both ways, right, Aaron? When you're walking in, to the conventional forces, I was learning as much from them as they were. Really, I felt like what did I bring? I brought something that's a 1% of the greater Green Machine or Canoe Club,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I brought a different perspective or just, I don't know, a different mindset. But what I learned from them was, limitless.
Yeah.
Because they had all been, there's all these people. And when I was, especially at MARSOC, one of the things that I was trying to do was make sure everybody really understood and appreciated everybody else for what they did.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you get that kind of operator mentality of like, oh, we've gone through all this to be where we are. Okay, cool. Would you want the finance person's job? No, that sounds awful. Okay, well, they don't want to jump out of airplanes.
Right,
so
right.
They work just as hard to get where you, both of you work equally as hard to get where you are and to be amazing at what you do. And when you have that mutual respect because you understood how hard that person worked to do. Now, obviously, there's bad operators and there's bad, logisticians and all that stuff, right? So, but when I'm talking about good, hardworking team members, when you build that understanding, that mutual understanding, then they begin to appreciate each other on a different level. That's where you start to build that sense of family, because there's no like, I'm this or I'm that. It's all like, hey, what do we all bring to this? And how can we make this whole thing better? That's where I think you get that synergy.
Well, and the fun flip side of, this whole conversation is that I walk around about 70% of my given day is I don't understand their processes. I don't understand their culture. I have to walk into people's offices as this operator, and I go to E5s. I walk up to the front office and I go, hey, Sarge, I don't know what letterhead to use for this product that I'm making. Can you help me out? Like 90% of my day, like Mr. Special Operator with all these combat deployments, I legitimately have to lean on people, and I have to walk into their office and be like, dude, I don't know how to do this. You have to help me. Like, can you tell me who does this get routed to? Am I going to make somebody mad if I send this from the org box or from my personal email? Like all these silly, queepy questions, but that's me indoctrinating to part of their team. I may have this 1% experience, but that means that there's 99% of their life that I don't understand. And that's it's my job.
Think about where we are. Like, we're not even really, I know there's some stuff going on in the world, but we're not in the GWAT anymore.
Right.
So,
which is weird.
One could argue that what they're doing
I spent my whole life in the GWAT.
Yeah, right. And I think you've got to build that holistic team, and that comes from people really, like to Morgan's point, loving each other, because it's like, wow, you're awesome at what you do. And that makes people feel good when you're walking around and you're like, bro, what do you do? Explain that to me, because I have no idea. Because they're proud of what they do.
But I think we're lucky coming from a community where you are expected and challenged all the time to keep growing, right? Like, one of the things that happened in that course I just came back from is somebody said something like, oh, like, well, we're all like at this rank, like you're not going to learn anything, and you're not going to grow, and you're not going to like move forward. And I was like, whoa, like, this is something like from our community we can push out there. Like, leadership is not a destination, and in our community it's very normal to be challenged and to seek out new challenges, and to have challenges come to your door and hit you in the face on a regular basis, whether that's an E5 or the mission set come down the road. And so I think we're kind of, like we're blessed in a way to have that, to live in that environment where that's required, so that you never become stagnant, where you never like, I'm leadership now, and I can just do whatever I want. No, like, you're always going to be challenged. So I think that's an important part of the culture that we can bring out to the greater forces. And I'm not saying everybody is like that, where they're like, oh, like, I made it. But there's some of that. And it's like, no. Like, just because you're 40 years old and an E8 or an E9 doesn't mean that you get to stop. Like, you should be more flexible now. You should be learning more now. You should, be pushing yourself out there to become a better person, like Coach said.
Well, and Trent, I think that if you rewind a little to where we were talking about the people that lose their sense of where they came from, those 8s and 9s that kind of lose it, they're the ones who are like, oh, I think they've got that hubris. And they're like, oh, I'm an 8 or I'm a 9 now. I can't learn anything else. The ones that are cool, the ones that people are attracted to and like to be around are the ones who are like, okay, this is really the rank on my collar has just increased the level of people I can tell to piss off. Like, that's all it's done, which also means it's increased the level of the support that I can provide the rest of the team, because now I've got an audience with, somebody else, somebody further up the food chain. So if you think about it from that context, you're still growing, you're still learning, you're still pushing the boundaries, but the people who are not and are sitting, like retired on active duty and all these other, acronyms or sayings that we have, those are the folks, they probably sucked when they were younger too, to be honest. They probably rode the coattails of a lot of other people.
This is just me being contrarian, but how dare we even have a term that is colloquial? Like you said retired on active duty, ROAD. How disgusting is it that we actually have a term that we all understand across our force for someone that has gotten to a level and then just checked the fuck out? Like, that makes me so, like, that should not be a term that we understand. That should not be something you should tell to me and I inherently understand. Like, I could think of people right now.
Yeah, we all can.
In my circle. Get out of here. It's terrible.
Yep. Little word bubbles popped up, little faces in front of everybody's head.
Exactly.
Trent, I got something for you. This is off note, but on note at the same time, as you are going to your senior academies and
he's
so
a graduate. Excuse me. He's a graduate. Thank you.
Right?
Wow. Put some respect on his name. Put some respect on it.
Get rid of the word flexibility, right? Because flexibility has a breaking point, and if you've learned anything with your wisdom, then you should have fluidity, because you're able to move into corners of your life and other people's lives that bring more value, and you're not breaking them. That's just something I wanted to add.
Man, that's the Bruce Lee stuff. That's be like water. Yeah. Man, I dig that, Coach Morgan.
It is, man. We get in these terms. We say these things because they're the small nuances in every conversation, but people repeat them. They were flexibility, but flexibility has a breaking point. And, if you've learned anything, you've learned not to go to the breaking point and trying to find a different way. And then we also confuse balance, right? Oh, balance. I think balance is bullshit. Like, it's not, it doesn't have longevity in it. What does?
It doesn't.
Harmony. Harmony does. How do you get two things to work together simultaneously for a goal, right? Because when you start balancing things, that takes a lot of effort, and the scales are going to tip, and then something's going to get more than the other. But if you get them to work together, then the level of stress is going to be minimized and the impact is going to be greater.
And if you actually focus on it, like we're striving towards synergy, and it's a dumb business term, but I want to make you better. I want you to make me better. And together, like, it's a synergistic effect. And, Jody knows from medicine, 1 + 1 sometimes can equal 3, not just 2. That's what we're going for. I want you to drive so hard in your lane and be a damn professional and be perfect. And I'm going to try to do the same thing. And together we're going to have an outsized effect. We're going to have something better than either one of us could have done individually. Like, I love that. I hate balance. I will not say flexibility again. Coach Morgan, you changed my lexicon. Like, that's because that's a great point, man. Yeah. You can only flex so far before you bend and break. Like, those things are,
we break. That's how we end up in depression and anxiety and all kinds of other shit, because we flex so far, we break. And if we just look for, okay, how can I do it better? Say, let me do it till I can't do it no more. Like, that sounds different.
Damn it. That's, wow. I mean? Man, I'm so glad I woke up late for this. You know what I mean? Like, geez, look at all the lessons I've learned.
But when I think about fluid too, I think one of the things you can do as a younger team member is, when you get on a new team, is look for the gaps that you can fill that aren't being filled right now, just like a fluid, right? And then if you do that for your whole career, when you become a leader, it's almost second nature. You can walk into a room for your new team and you can identify those gaps that need to be filled and the gaps that don't need to be filled. And then as you get to know people and move them around and truly manage your talent and find the things that everybody's good at, I don't believe in useless people. I don't believe in useless team members. Find a place for them to fit And if they're trying to force themselves into a gap that doesn't exist, like have that conversation with them and figure it out. But, when you said fluid, that's all I thought about is flowing into the gaps and making everything,
See work,
solid.
do work. We all talk about it.
Well, and to continue that metaphor we had, and Morgan, you probably remember Henry Kitatuka. He would always tell everybody, you're a tributary coming into our river, right? And this was during the Chiefs, for us in the Navy, the Chiefs thing is a big thing, right? And he would tell people, you're a tributary coming into our river. Don't pollute our river, right? So what he was telling them, kind of like that fluid, you're coming in and you're going to join this big movement that's going forward, which for us is leadership and values and love and all that stuff. And he would tell them, don't be the dirty water coming into our river. So aside from finding the place that you can fit in, it's also how crystal clear is the water, how pure is the water that you're bringing in and adding to that river that's moving forward.
Well, and that's important. That's important for that leader because he established, we talked about, us versus them and, how do you lean into those positions? It's just as important to sometimes look at people and be like, dude, we got a good thing. You need to step your effing game up. Don't pollute my river. You're a part of this organization, whether you like it or not. You're going to influence these things. You need to be the best because I won't accept you polluting my river. And that's one of those things. Like I don't like being directive, but I do like telling people. I had an enlisted call, a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about it's normal stuff. Like every once in a while, the squadron gets a little bit too loose on somebody's not wearing the uniform, correctly. Like everybody's wearing hats in the unit. Like you're allowed to wear PT gear in our organization. If you're not doing, whatever, if you're not going to, some other function, if you're just in the unit doing squad work, okay, fine, throw your PT gear on, whatever. But it's like the standards started like slipping. So it's like people are now wearing hats inside all day. And then it's like, it's not an approved hat. It's sort of like a close to approved hat. It's sort of a military color, but it's not what you're supposed to be wearing. And I got everybody together. And early in my leadership, career, I would hate these things because of the way that people approach them. Right? It felt directive and whatever. But I had a talk. I was like, there is no good cop, bad. It was me and the first sergeant, and I said, there's no good cop, bad cop. I'm not going to take away your privilege. I'm going to tell you these are the things that I'm seeing, and it's unacceptable for you to do this in this organization. We're the best STS and AFSOC. Period. I want you to look like it. And from the outside looking in, I want other people to see, stop. We are. Tutu, what up? Stop. I'll put some respect on the name. But, it was that thing. Like I've grown into a place where I found a way to have those conversations. But I clarified the intent. I was like, hey, the reason that we wear this shirt as opposed to a shirt that kind of looks like this shirt is because I want you guys to value the tutu in the way that I do. I want you to value this organization the way that I do because we're heading towards greatness. And I want you to be additive. I want you to be that tributary. And I want to establish it's not okay for you to pollute this thing. It's not okay for you to be an outlier. I want you to be on board. And there are very few times that I'll direct somebody. But when culture is involved, like as an enlisted person, I own the culture. It is my job to set that culture, and you're not allowed to pollute the river that we're going with your bad tributary. That is a great way to describe it.
Yeah, old Henry's a wise old man.
So what's it like out there in the civilian world as you try to take these concepts and everything that you've learned and push it out there? How much resistance do y'all get?
Jody, none.
Yeah, it really, I think it is. And it's interesting. I find that a lot of the core concepts of leadership that we teach or are taught in the military at a very young age are often foreign concepts to some very senior leaders in some very large organizations. I'll say something, in a conversation with whoever, right, of a super large organization, and it like blows their mind. Like, how did you not know this? Like, we learned this as 19, 20-year-olds, right? And
right.
But there's not a lot of, if you think about leadership as a concept, it's taught in sports to some degree, but it's not really taught in class or in college or anything like that. So you either learn it because you had a great mentor or you were in an environment, you were lucky enough to be in an environment where it's just there, or you don't learn it. And so then you're promoted to your level of incompetence. And that's where you see a lot of leadership failures. And that's where I find a lot of work on the civilian side is when you get these people that are like, I don't know why everybody hates coming to work. And I don't know why the morale sucks. And you start talking to them and you're like, and that's why I always say you have to be a good human to be a great leader. Yeah. If you're a good human, we can make you a great leader. Those are skill sets you can put on top of being a good human. But if you're not a good human, you're not going to be a great leader. I challenge anybody. Suck. Yeah, I challenge anybody. And there will be people out there that'll say, oh, well, they'll cite some CEO who is known to be a jerk and they had a successful team. That doesn't mean that person was a great leader. It means that the team got stuff done. Yeah. And we all see that, right? And a lot of times, these bad people are promoted on the backs of the work of the team and not because of their own leadership example.
Are we about to talk for 2 more hours? Because holy cow, Aaron, boy, you know what I mean?
The key, that's the big part, right? We have spent however many years developing our skills, right? And a lot of them, this is one big skill, right? As enlisted, like you said, we're keepers of tradition and so on and so forth and custom and courtesies. But we also are the best at building relationships because that's how we get things done.
Yeah.
Right. Who we know, where they are, the Chiefs mess or wherever organization it is, the inner service, right? Joint stuff. And that's how we are able to be so effective at what we do. Right. One of the biggest things that I teach is relationship building. Like, how can I see like leadership 101? Like, how do it's not go into it and say, this is how it will be. It's asking the question, which way do you see it? How can I show up better for you, right? How can I make it the environment safer for you? Because most of the time, people confuse leadership with dictatorship or management or being a director, and that's not what it's not about. It's not about telling them what to do. It's influencing them to make the right decisions, teaching them to make the right decisions, right? And that's where I see, especially leaving. I was worried. I ain't gonna lie. When I left to go in retirement, Jody would tell you I was worried about leaving, and everybody kept telling me I'll be okay. I'm like, I don't know. These people seem like they move slower or less efficient. Like it was scary, and it still bothers me sometimes. But it's people out here that want the information that we have. They want it. They are hungry for it because they understand the value of leading people. Not everybody will have that same outlook on leadership, but you can't save them all. Just save the ones that want to be saved.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I find, the biggest concept is, we all care about the people we lead, and I call it driveway to driveway leadership. It's important to know as much about the person in the driveway they leave from in the morning is the parking lot they pull into at work. And a lot of organizations, especially in the civilian side, they only care about the person that pulls into the parking lot.
Yeah.
And that's half of the person, right? So do you want 50% of the effort from your person or do you want 100%? And when you start to put it in that context and help them understand as leaders, you need to know about your people as much as they're willing to share, right? You can't go overboard. But that was one of those concepts when I was talking about that with somebody and they were kind of like, oh, I never thought of that. I'm like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Like, what do you talk to your people about?
It's mind blowing. Oh, you've never thought of that? Oh, word.
And then what happens is they go in, say somebody messes something up and they go in to have a conversation with them about that to hold them accountable for something. And they don't understand why the person is upset. And I'm like, because you don't know. It seems like the only time you talk to them is when something's gone wrong.
Exactly.
If they don't know that you care about them. And the thing with the generation coming into the workforce now, and this is there's all kinds of articles and, anecdotal evidence or whatever, that they want to know that they're being cared for. We grew up in an environment of do what you're told. It was that kind of leadership. And that paradigm has shifted. And if you consider that, especially with the leaders that are in their 60s, they're still coming from our perspective. And they're the ones that really need to shift their ideals and understand how to connect with people. Because I've talked to people and worked with people that will leave
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
or leave. Yeah.
Old men are supposed to do what old men do, and it's either die or retire. Sometimes that's the best thing that old men can do is get out of the
Well,
way.
hold on. We retired. Just be careful with that. I'm about to go out here and put in another 5 miles. I ain't old. I just,
Hey,
I
well,
just, I
good.
just
Then it
move
wasn't.
wisely.
Then no reason to internalize that one, Coach Morgan. Jody, what you're saying here, I live by the soft truths, right? And one of the soft truths is that you cannot make a soft force in response to a conflict. You have to start. It has to be made beforehand, right? Like that's one of the soft truths. But it's exactly what you're saying. If you only talk to people and you only put in that effort when a situation arises, you've already failed. You have to do that way beforehand. You have to know your people beforehand. You have to actually lean into that driveway to driveway leadership. That's a fantastic analogy. I have to give a shit about you before the thing happens. I have to lean in because humans are more important than hardware. Quality over quantity. All of these things are things that we know. You have to lean into those things beforehand, or you're never going to be able to lead in the way that you want to.
That's right. And the people are not going to, they're not going to be invested. You're going to have people waking up thinking, I have to go to work, not I want to go to work.
I get to go to work.
Yeah.
I get to train today. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think we made it. I know Coach has a hard out that we're trying to get to. And we talked about a lot of stuff, and I threw a grenade in early, and Coach, I still feel real bad about it. I know you're trying to get to your thing. But as we wrap up, you guys are Coach Morgan, Jody, you guys do the That L Word podcast, where you talk about leadership and love and anything else that starts with the letter L and beyond. Go check it out on Apple, and where can they find you? Instagram?
Most platforms.
We're on all the things. Yeah, there's some stuff I hadn't even heard of before.
Yeah, I found you on Podbean. Like, that's not a thing. Stop it.
No, but guys, I really appreciate you coming on. I legit, we could talk about this forever, I think, because I think we're all passionate about it. And but I really appreciate you guys coming out. Appreciate Nate and Worth being people that put people together. That's super awesome. And for everybody else out there, like, subscribe, and we'll catch y'all next time. Train hard. Later.
Word. Thanks, gents.
Thanks, guys.
Word.